France votes for pension reform, but unions insist the protests will continue against President Sakozy's bill. He hopes the storm will pass, but has the damage to his popularity been done, and what else can he do should the escalation continue? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Foliba Thibault. France has taken a major step towards raising its retirement age, the issue that sparked demonstrations and strikes across the country for the past few weeks. It was close, but President Sakozy's flagship pension reform bill has now been adopted definitely by the Senate. But union leaders say that does not mean their protests are over. Zainab Walchi has more.
Portant réforme des retraites.
In what appears to be an act of defiance, the French Senate have approved the controversial pension bill that sees the age of retirement rise from 60 to 62. And though a joint committee of Senate and National Assembly members prepare to finalise the bill, this story is far from over. The French are growing increasingly unhappy with the way they have been governed. And spurred on by the unions, they have taken to the streets to defend what they see as an attack on their rights. Protests that are backed by 70% of the nation, with a further 73% wanting the proposed reform completely withdrawn. But this is a rebellion that runs deeper than the question of pensions.
It is a reflection of a general fatigue because of an expanding economic and social crisis. The pension reforms were only the straw that broke the camel's back. Real democracies are shaped by the media, and we express our views in the ballot box.
Sentiments understood by members of the opposition.
Despite the popular resentment, you have approved this law, shoved it through, and are trying to impose it on the French people. You do not understand the people, do not listen to the people, and do not care about their aspirations or worries. You respond using force. The president has put the protesters and saboteurs under one label, like someone who sets himself ablaze and then shouts, "Fire, fire!"
For now, it seems the French voices are falling on deaf ears. But as the unions and the opposition continue to mount the pressure, Sarkozy may be left with no choice but to water down or withdraw the bill altogether. If the imposition of this deeply unpopular reform does indeed go ahead, the political price for Sarkozy could be very high. Zainab Walji, Inside Story.
So, can Nicolas Sarkozy emerge victorious, or will the French unions regain the upper hand? Joining us for today's discussion are our guests in Paris, Paul Midi, Communications Director for the youth wing of France's ruling party, the Union for a Popular Movement, UMP. Also in Paris, Raphael Niedzinski, an executive committee member of the Force Ouvrière Union. And in Birmingham, in the UK, Pierre Purseigle, Assistant Professor of History at the University of Birmingham. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being on the program. Let me start with you, Raphael Niedzinski. So the bill has passed in the Senate. It seems a victory for President Sarkozy. It could become law in the next few days. What are you going to do now?
Well, we have already announced that we're going to have to organize further demonstration. The first one is already planned for next week, and the other one will take place the following week. There are strikes going on with thousands of people still on strike in different sectors of activities. So as far as the bill is not passed, the question is not over. And even then, I think the question will be on the table for various reasons.
But aren't you concerned that the support for these demonstrations are fizzling out, that, you know, many people are no longer willing, basically, to forego their wages and are simply tired of these perpetual strikes in France?
Well, obviously, once somebody is on strike, the consequence is that that person is sacrificing his wage. So obviously, we can't go like that for weeks on that strike. But at the same time, we see that the determination of both demonstrators and workers on strike is still very strong, because simply we consider that this reform is unfair, but also will be inefficient. So that's why we're asking the president to open the discussion he has never really opened with unions since the beginning of the discussion of the reform.
Paul, we just heard Raphael Niedzinski say that the government isn't allowing any dialogue with the unions, that is pushing through with these reforms with no dialogues. Do you agree with this?
No, I totally disagree. First, thank you very much for your invitation on your show, but I totally disagree. I've heard things like we fast-track the debate. It's totally wrong. It's since 20 years in my country, since I'm born, we are discussing this reform of pension system. First thing, that is not an issue coming from nowhere, surging into the debate from the middle of nowhere. Since 4 empty months, the whole political class is dedicated to that subject, to that issue, to the reform of pension system. 4 months ago, the government has put on the table his proposal, and all the trade unions and all the political parties have been invited in the discussion, have been listened by the government. They will be, they was able to share their proposal, and since a few weeks now, the reform is.
Let me just ask you this. Let me just ask you this, Paul. I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. We've seen a lot of young people take to the streets recently in France, in Paris, in the big cities there. Aren't you concerned as a young Frenchman that by raising the retirement age, this could only increase the already high unemployment rate in France?
So, okay, two points on that. First, I have been very, very shocked, you know, that Socialist Party, through the voice of Ségolène Royal, which was the last candidate for presidential election, you know, encourage high school students to go to demonstrate and to go on street, because we know exactly every time it is the same story. And when you have a demonstration with young people, there are delinquents, aggressive people who are joining the demonstration, stealing in shops, breaking, and be aggressive with policemen. And you know, for policemen, it's every time very difficult, you know, to differentiate from the good guy from the bad guy.
So Raphael Lazinski, I saw you there shaking your head. You seem to disagree with what Paul is saying there.
But
well, I mean, absolutely.
Like
I think urban violence is a feature for many times. So I mean, just to say that because there are demonstrations, they necessarily get violence. It's just ignoring the reality.
But
I mean, we have a problem of urban violence
that's why
for months already,
you know?
in this country. And this time, if you just look at last Tuesday demonstration, they were very peaceful because it was properly organized by unions.
But at the same time, don't you think, Raphael, that these demonstrations...
You can do it in that case.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. Don't you think that the violent protests that we've seen in recent days in France, doesn't this undermine the union's position?
Well, first of all, as I said, I mean, we disapprove and we condemn this sort of violence. We have nothing to do with that. I'm just making very clear that every time we organize a demonstration, these are well-organized demonstrations, and there hasn't been any problem. Now, if you have this sort of violence reaction,
if I may interrupt,
well, that takes place elsewhere. You would have that also in football games. You know that in suburbs of Paris that has happened several times. So that's one thing. Secondly, I don't like these political games, just accusing this or that person. I mean, the way you were presenting things is as if Mr. Royal was calling young people to do something illegal or whatever. This is not the case. The real question maybe is to say, well, whether Mrs. Royal was legitimate to do that. I would consider that youth organization are more legitimate.
Gentlemen, just let me interrupt you for a second. Raphael, do you think this could lead to another May 68?
I don't think so. We are in a completely different context. In May 68, you had different claims coming from different points. You had strikes that started locally on different issues, such as wages, working conditions. Students had other problem, and that get all together. Here, I think we're very clear that the issue is retirement, and only that. I mean, to be very clear, if there is a dialogue, which has never taken place, I think it's very clear from our side, from union side, that there will be no more demonstration and no more strike if we really can get back to the table and discuss seriously. Listening is one thing. Take into account what the people you're talking to is a different thing. Just take the document that was presented in April and in May by the government and look at the document where it's now. Well, you see there's very little difference. The government is saying itself that it has admitted just marginal points, but the core of the reform is still there. So to say that the government has been listening to unions is just not a reality.
All right, Paul Midi, what's your answer?
Okay. Yeah, I think first, we have a parliament with representatives which are elected by citizens. So, it's something very important. And when you want to vote a law, the debate may happen inside parliament. First thing. Second thing about the fact that the text didn't change during the debates is totally wrong.
Well, the president did make some concessions, but they were very minor, you have to agree.
No.
Absolutely.
What we did for women with children, it's several billions of euros. It's not minor changes. You can't tell that. And we did many changes for people for the work
That will concern
for
only
which
women
the work
between
is
51
harder.
and 55.
Yes,
All right,
but
Raphael?
it's got already several billions,
No, I'm saying
so
that
I can't,
this question of women
you
will
can't
concern
say
just women born between
there was no
1951 and
debate in
1955.
the parliament, because there was debate in the parliament, and the government could fast track the debate because we have a lot of levers to do that, but he makes the choice not to fast track the debate.
All right,
So it's the
Raphael
first thing.
Nizinski, you do agree, however.
And I wanted to answer, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Paul. Let's just get the view of Raphael on this issue of reform. Do you do agree, though, Raphael, that there has to be some sort of reform of the pension system? I mean, the pyramid has changed, and there's a lot of money to be paid for the pensions, and not enough, it seems. What are you suggesting? What are the unions suggesting to deal with this issue?
Well, first of all, I mean, we accept and we say that there is a need of a reform. Can I remind that we've had already a reform in 2004, which was carried through by a Minister of Labour who was at that time Mr. Fillon. And if we are discussing now is because that reform was inefficient. Obviously, we're saying, yes, we have to find more money. Can I just say first that this reform is not going to ensure the financement of our pension system on a longer term. We've made financial proposal. We've said, for instance, that workers are prepared to contribute more to the pension scheme. That means increase our social contribution. Of course, under the condition that companies do also make an effort. We consider that there are certain things that should be taxed. For instance, we have in France a profit-sharing system. We consider that this system could be submitted to social contribution. That, for instance, alone would bring 3 billion more. So we've made a number of proposals. All our proposals together would bring in 28 billion more in our retirement system. So we've made our proposal. The problem is the government is ignoring that. It took only into account proposals that were going according his line. But we made different proposals, all unions together, and yet the government didn't listen to that.
Raphael Nizinski, maybe I should let Paul Midi answer to what you were just saying before. Paul, what do you have to say to Raphael's comments?
I want to get back to the theme of the debate. First, we have now 30 billion euro of deficit in your pension system. Then the life expectancy has increased a lot and is going to increase in the future. So more and more, there are less and less working people to pay for more and more retired. So we had three options. So you can increase the payroll taxes. It's not an option for us. You can decrease and reduce the amount of the pension. It was not an option for us. So the third and last and final option we had chosen is to increase the number of years of employment needed to have a full pension. It was the only option which can guarantee the purchasing power of both working people and retired people. So, you know, I need, we had this debate since many years, since I'm young, I'm 27 years old. And since I'm born, I have been listening to political debate about pension system. You know, it's quite easy. The person from Force Ouvrière is proposing to increase payroll taxes, and we think it's a bad idea, because if you increase payroll taxes, the cost of employment is becoming very heavy, and in France it is already heavy, and it is very bad. It's going to unemployment.
Well, we have our Paul. We have our guest from Birmingham, and he hasn't said anything yet. So let's try and get his view on this. Pierre Purseigle, I was asking before. You know, President Sakozy is under a great deal of pressure at this time. You know, there's been a controversy over the expulsion of Roma people in France. Now there are these demonstrations over pension reform. What do you think is pushing forward with these measures now?
Right. Well, I think he essentially needs a big reform. Here's a man who was elected almost 3 years ago, on the very simple idea that he will reform the country, that would break with the past of the nation unable to reform itself. Now, if you look at what is actually achieved, he has indeed very little to show to the French electorate. And what he needs now is a reform to show to the population when he goes back to the poll in 2012, seeking re-election. Now, interestingly, of course, if you can take several indicators of Sarkozy's politics and see that this is just, this debate is yet again a rerun of the conflict between the right-wing populists and a population who I think truly believes in the necessity for reform, but simply hasn't seen any since his election.
All right, well, let's take a look now at the wider European picture, if we can. Almost all European countries have had to review their retirement age as part of austerity measures meant to revive their economies. For example, both the Spanish and German governments are planning to increase their retirement age from 65 to 67. Now, figures from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, show that French workers get to spend more of their life in retirement than those in any other European country. Spanish men, for instance, get to spend about 21 years in retirement, while women get about 23 years. In Germany, men get less than 20 years, while women get a little more than 24 years. And in the UK, it's even less. Women get around 22 years, while men get about 19. In France, however, men get to spend around 24 years in retirement, while women get more than 27 years. This is the highest level in the EU. So, you know, Raphael, I'm almost tempted to say, are the French too spoiled, perhaps?
Well, can I say two things? First of all, concerning Germany, we've just received 2 days ago a message from the president of the German trade union DGB, Michael Sommer, who said that he's supporting us because the German trade union movement is opposing the move from 65 to 67 in Germany because it doesn't work. The argument of Mr. Sommer is to say, well, very few workers in Germany work until 65 and even less to 67 because they have health problems or because they are unemployed. So the result of moving the age from 65 to 67 in Germany has as a consequence that in fact pensions are going down, and that's the only effect of moving from 65 to 67. That is for Germany. Secondly, concerning the life expectation, the problem is that those who are putting forward this reform are using this argument only when it suits them. When we as unions are saying, well, there are also categories of workers who have a very lower life expectation and these people should leave earlier, there is no proper reply from the government. The only thing that government has said is for certain categories of workers, those whose disability of 20% has been recognized, that means people who are already ill, these people will be allowed to leave at 60. But those who are living in working in hard living conditions, there's nothing that has been proposed, whereas we've asked, that was one of the 3 main points we've put on the discussion.
Now, Pierre Purseigle, do you think we're likely to see movements like the one in France in other European countries, or are the French just so simply hostile to reform?
I mean, there are specificities to the French case. I think it's important to remind our audience that the very principle, the very necessity of a pension reform is accepted by most stakeholders in France. I think the French population is aware that the financial situation is a difficult one and that things need to be done, but there are specific conditions that need to be taken into consideration. And as the previous speaker mentioned, we need to take into consideration the complexity of situations among the workforce. Now, the other thing as well is that there are specificities to the French political system which account for the fact that it seemed for many years impossible to have a peaceful social dialogue in France. The problem is both structural and cultural in a sense. Structural because politically, on the face of it, the president can afford to ignore the public opinion. After all, he's got a majority in parliament, he can get his law and his reform passed. Now, the issue here is that in accordance with the sort of philosophical basis of the political system, as it were, there is simply no outlet for the French population to express its grievances. The only resort they have is simply to take to the streets, because the parliament is simply not in a position to relay their demands, to relay their grievances.
All right.
And I think the problem we Yes?
Yeah,
Sorry.
just because we're running out of time, let's try and give the last word to
Sure.
Paul Middy of the UMP youth movement. So how do you think then the situation is likely to evolve? Many have expressed discontent with President Nicolas Sarkozy, and this puts him in a difficult position, of course, ahead of the 2012 presidential election. How do you see France's position evolving within the EU?
I want to say about the next week. First, there is a recent poll, I think it was a poll from yesterday, which says that 56% of French people want the demonstration ends with the vote in the parliament. So I hope things will end because, you know, there has been many debates, many dialogue, discussions inside Parliament, before with the government. So I think now we can. The law has been voted. So, and I hope, you know, strikes will be weakened and high school students go back to you know, high schools. And I hope no violence will be,
right.
you know, see again.
All right. Well, very passionate discussion. Sorry, unfortunately, we're completely out of time. A very passionate discussion. Thank you all for taking part in this discussion in Paris. Paul Middy and Raphael Niedzinski, and in Birmingham in the UK, Pierre Pursec. Thank you all for taking part in this edition of Inside Story. And thank you as well for joining us. We welcome your comments as always. You can log on to our website or email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Thanks for watching.